we go next to our next speaker, Lynne McTaggart. She is well, worldwide known for the experiments with intention. So, giving the word to Lynne McTaggart and enjoy her lecture.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lynne McTaggart, and I'm thrilled to be part of this conference, even virtually. So I'd like to thank Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who is a dear friend and colleague, and we've worked together on many intention experiments over many years, which I'd love to talk to you about as we go on. But first, I want to confess something to you, which is kind of an odd thing, given that I'm associated so much with the power of intention. And that is, when I first got into this, I did not believe. I did not believe in the power of intention. Lots of things in the popular press have been coming to the fore, things about manifestation and the law of attraction. But I have a background as an investigative reporter, and I approach most things with a skeptical mind. Now, I had finished a book called The Field, which was all about the latest discoveries by a number of frontier scientists who had found that we are part of a giant energy field. They found many discoveries that really undermined the paradigm that we have now about who we are and how we live. Their discoveries were giving us ideas about a new science that was unfolding, a new way of looking at the world. And one of the things that they'd come to discover was actually that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. Now, being a skeptical journalist, I wondered what they're talking about. How far can we take this? Are we talking about just moving a quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? So at that time, my books were in 30 languages around the world, so I knew I had lots of readers. And I also knew many scientists who were working in consciousness research. And I thought if I just put them together and set up a series of well-controlled experiments testing the power of intention, that we'd have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And that's what we did. Now, I didn't really expect this to work very well. I thought maybe we'd have very subtle effects, but it actually really worked. I've been running intention experiments since 2007. We've run 33 to date, everything from trying to make seeds grow faster to trying to lower violence in war-torn areas. And of those 33, 29 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. By comparison, there's no drug out there with that kind of consistent track record. So I want to walk you through some of these experiments, but also some really amazing things I discovered along the way. So I'm going to share my screen, and I should pop up as a little thing in the corner. So let me just organize sharing my screen with you. 1 second. Here we go. There we go. And there I am in the corner. And so here's my presentation. So you should be able to see me and the presentation at the same time. So we started out small, as I said, with seeds and leaves. And one of the first scientists I worked with was Dr. Gary Schwartz, a noted psychologist at the University of Arizona. And we set up an ingenious experiment using 4 sets of seeds. We labeled them A, B, C, and D. His lab team put these together, photographed them, and sent me the photos. And the first time we tried this experiment, I was speaking before a group in Sydney, Australia, of about 700 people. So we chose one of the photos, let's call it group A. And we didn't tell the scientists which group we chose. We set an intention to, and there's the intention there, for all the seeds in our target group to sprout at least 3 centimeters by the 4th day of growing. After we were done, we told the scientists we were done, which was their cue to plant all 4 sets of seeds. We still didn't tell them which seeds we set intention to, and after they'd finished measuring, only then did I tell them, well, we set an intention for group A. And what happened was amazing. The group set intention, remember there were 4 sets, grew significantly higher than controls. Now, let's unpack this for a second. Here we were in Sydney, Australia. Those seeds were sitting in a lab in Tucson, Arizona, 8,000 miles away. Nevertheless, we had an effect. Furthermore, we weren't sending intention to the seeds themselves. We were sending intention actually to a photograph of the seeds, a symbolic representation of those seeds, yet we had an effect. So I started me thinking that maybe there is some sort of psychic internet going on here that enables thoughts to affect their targets no matter how far the distance, no matter even when you're sending an intention to a symbol of the thing rather than the thing itself. Now we ran this experiment 5 more times in front of different audience sizes and also among my audience of thousands over the internet. We ran it in Rhinebeck, New York with a small audience of 100. We ran it in South Carolina with a large audience of healers. We ran it in Dallas, Texas, and LA, and then again over the internet. And every single time, the seeds set intention grew significantly higher than controls. So we moved on to water this time. We ran a number of clean water experiments. We've run many of them with many scientists. The late Dr. Rustum Roy, one of the water experts of the world, Dr. Gary Schwartz, again at the University of Arizona, and also Dr. Konstantin Korotkov in St. Petersburg, Russia, or when he was at a conference where I was speaking as well. And one of those conferences, there he is, one of these conferences was Lake Biwa in Japan. We were invited by the late Masaru Emoto to try to do an experiment to purify a sample of the water from Lake Biwa, which is the largest lake. It's considered the mother lake of Japan. It feeds a lot of the population with water, but it's highly polluted. So we took 2 samples of the water. One was going to be our control and the other our experimental water. And with Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who was there at the time, we did this experiment. And we not only had the intenders be the audience themselves of about 700, but also my internet audience around the world, because we ran it simultaneously on my website. And our intention was to increase the pH, to purify the water, make it more alkaline by at least 1 pH or more. And we imagined the water becoming more pure, like a mountain stream. And afterward, he measured it, Dr. Korotkov measured it, and we found that the water sent intention had a significantly higher pH, and also the GDV measurements were different as well. They were quite different, significantly different. So one of the more recent experiments we did involved Dr. Korotkov's Sputnik, or what he calls an integral environment analyzer. And what this equipment does, I'm sure he's described it to you, is it measures human emotions on the environment. It's highly sensitive equipment, and it registers atmospheric changes relative to changes in people. So if our parasympathetic nervous system changes, and that's our rest and digest nervous system, it can be picked up. Its atmospheric changes can be picked up by Sputnik. And what it does is it picks up the capacitance, which is the environment's ability to store charge. and is highly sensitive to any changes in electromagnetic fields. So we constructed a very ingenious but simple experiment where Dr. Korotkov set up in his lab in St. Petersburg this set of equipment. So he had a biowell device, he had a sample of water, which we were measuring with GDV and also Sputnik. And I was in Miami, Florida, with an audience of about 700 in March in 2017. And I asked them to focus on this picture and where the setup was in St. Petersburg, and to send an intention to that water. Now, we measured it very exactly by the timings afterward, and this is what happened. As you can see, Dr. Korotkov started measuring well before we did the experiment, and our experiments are only 10 minutes long. And he then started measuring what was going on, and that shows you the green measurements are once I started speaking. And then when we did the experiment itself, that 10-minute window, you see the red bar is a very significant change, just when we were setting intention to that water. So these were all remarkable, and there were many, many more that were happening. But it's not the real point of my story. My story begins in a workshop in Chicago in 2008, when I started thinking about how to scale this down to a workshop. Some of the amazing things I was finding in these intention experiments, but I wasn't really sure how to do it. So I was kicking around this idea with my husband one night. He's also a journalist. And I said, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll put people in groups of 8 or so and have them set a healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And my husband's a natural headline writer. And so he said, I love it, the power of 8. And that's exactly how it started, really by accident. And so we decided to do this. And when we had this first workshop of about 100 people or so, we put people in groups of 8 or so. We had them set intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And they selected that person. And Brian and I, my husband and I, did not think there was going to be much of an effect. We thought it would be a feel-good effect, a little bit like having a facial or getting your back massaged. But we sent the people back to the rooms at the end of our workshop on that Saturday, after they'd done this intention, and had them come back the next day and report on what happened. And one by one, the people who had received the intention began to talk. Now, this was a group just about like this. And they'd all been in these little circles, holding hands, setting intention for just 10 minutes once again. And we expected it was going to be this very mild effect. Well, that's not what happened. This is what happened. It was like the lame were walking. A woman came in who had insomnia for years, and she said she slept like a baby that night. Another woman was due, she had terrible arthritis in her knee and couldn't walk properly and was due to have an operation, and she said she was walking normally that day and could walk downstairs just normally. There was another woman who had terrible headaches, terrible migraines, and she said her head was clear. There was a guy who said he had IBS, and suddenly his IBS was cleared, and someone else cleared a depression. And I'm thinking to myself what my 23-year-old daughter usually says, which is WTF. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? And yet, I thought it was a placebo effect, but I kept going. And whenever I had to speak somewhere, I put people in groups like this and tested this power of 8, as I was beginning to call it. And wherever I went, wherever in the world I was speaking, I put people in groups, and the same thing happened. For instance, not long ago, I spoke at the Mile High Church in Denver, Colorado. And I had put people in groups, and this is what happened. There was a woman called Linda who reversed her stage 4 lung cancer after just one 10-minute Power of 8 group. We had a woman called Natalie whose family business was collapsing, and her family business was saved afterwards. She suddenly got all this kind of new business in after this Power of 8 group. And Connie, who had terrible TMJ pain in her jaw, and that was erased after one Power of 8 group. We had Sandy, who came in barely able to walk on one knee, due to have a knee replacement. And after that 10-minute Power of 8 group, she could do a deep squat. Subsequently, she was able to cancel her surgery. We had Beverly, who had a dislocated shoulder, who came to this talk. And during the Power of 8 group, it slotted back into place. And Joan, who had double vision after having a stroke. And after her Power of 8 group, she could see normally. And even Faith, who was a skeptic, whose back pain nevertheless dissipated after being part of a Power of 8 group. It was remarkable. And people were reporting other things too. They were reporting special visions they were seeing during this Power of 8 group. One woman said there was this light, a ball of light, a light being of sorts, as if they were the magnifiers and they were behind us and their energy was coming through us. It was as if somebody with big mitts was holding my legs, said someone else. Kundalini type energy poured out into the floor through my arms, said someone else. People were reporting all kinds of things. In fact, Roses said something I didn't understand at the time. She said, I felt like I was giving and receiving healing, like I was healing myself. Here's what one 10-minute group intention can do. Last summer, I was speaking at a conference. And as I do with all the conferences, I put people in groups of 8 or so at the end of my talk, and I run a Power of 8 intention with them. So we do a 10-minute intention. And when they're put in their little groups, they select a member of their group with a health challenge, and they all set an intention for that person, holding hands and all doing the intention together while I lead the group. Now, one of the people in one of the groups was a woman called Maya, young woman who had idiopathic paralysis that had developed. And she's a dancer, which made it even more tragic. She was paralyzed from the neck down and arrived at our conference in a wheelchair. So her group set intention for her to be able to overcome her paralysis. And I have a video of exactly what happened afterward, because after this kind of thing, I always ask members of the audience who were part of the groups to stand up and talk about what happened. So here she is right after her 10-minute intention.
I'm okay, I don't need you. I am in a wheelchair. I became paralysed from the neck down in January this year, within the space of 2 hours. And I'm a contemporary dancer, and there's nothing wrong technically. So I recovered. I had 3.5 weeks half walking, and then it happened again in April. And I kind of recovered-ish until July, and then they just keep coming and going. My legs just come and go. It's mostly my legs at the moment. So my legs went again on Sunday. And I've not been able to stand for this long. Wow. I can just stand. Yeah. And dance is my absolute love. I'm a dance teacher, and I love moving more than anything in the world. And I'm really so beyond grateful, because I know the whole group were just visualizing me dancing and showing that I am just free, and that was the massive message I got. And I felt this massive buzz throughout my whole body from you all. It was like the most amount of love I've ever felt. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So Maya, I talked to Maya afterward, and Maya described the experience. She said that there was so much love coming at her that she almost couldn't deal with it. So she said, I have to give some of this on to someone else. So she thought of a relative of hers who had cancer, and she sent some of that healing energy to her relative. And it was at that moment that she felt the wheels of her wheelchair almost going through the floor, so that she didn't need it anymore. And as you can hear, when somebody was trying to help her stand up in the beginning of this testimonial, she said, I don't need you anymore. So this was remarkable, but I've seen hundreds and thousands of these kinds of healings, and in just 10 minutes. So I was pretty freaked out by these results. You know, I'm a journalist, not a healer. So I went back to my intention experiments, and this time I wanted to do something big. This was back in 2008. I turned to Dr. Gary Schwartz and a number of others from Princeton and University of California and said, let's do something huge. Let's get a team of scientists together and let's do a peace intention experiment. So I had to look for a place where they were actually recording casualties. And during wars, no government likes to talk about the bodies. So I looked and looked for months and finally found Sri Lanka. I found a very good organization that was keeping track of injuries and deaths from a civil war that had been going on for 25 years. The rebels had taken over the entire part of the north, and the government was at a stalemate. Nobody was winning, and casualties were just going up and up and up. So we sent an intention over 8 days, each day for 10 minutes over 8 days with my audience around the world. We had about 15,000 people participating. And here's what happened. Now, violence went up during the 8 days of our experiment, which actually scared me a bit, but then it plummeted afterward. And the death rate fell by 74%. The injury rate fell by 48%. Now, that was fascinating. But when we did a time analysis, we also found that the violence continued to go down. Now, if you look at this, this is done by Dr. Jessica Utz, who is a specialist in consciousness research. She found and measured what had gone on for 2 years before, because we had that much data, and what would have happened had it carried on to the same degree, the violence levels, the injuries and deaths to the same degree. And as you can see with the little green marker, that is what would have happened if what had happened before carried on at the same rate. But as you can see with a little dot to the very right of that image, the last dot, that's where the injuries and deaths actually were, well below what should have happened had the injury and death rate carried on. So that was interesting, but even more interesting was what happened subsequently. Now, as I said, there was higher violence than usual during the week of our intention. That was a little scary to me, but what it turned out to be was that the government won a number of decisive battles just during that window of intention, that 8 days, that enabled it to turn around the course of the war. Within a few months, it was able to recapture the North from the rebels, and in a few months after that, that 25-year-old intractable war was over. Now, it ended in a bloody finish, but it finished. Now, did we do this? Short answer, who knows? You know, there are many variables in a war that can change its course. So what you have to do is do it over and over again. And then when it keeps happening, this starts becoming interesting. So I ran a Heal America experiment. We've run 7 peace intention experiments to date. But I want to tell you about this one. And by the way, all 7 have shown measurable positive responses. So this time I chose the most violent place in America, which is officially St. Louis, Missouri. It has the highest crime rate in America, particularly one part of it called Fairground, which is near the Natural Bridge Avenue part of the city. So we set intention there. And once again, we were able to get very accurate police statistics from 3 years before our experiment to 6 months afterward. And we measured the violence levels of Fairground, which is what we were setting intention to, the levels of property crime in Fairground, the property crime in St. Louis as a whole, and the violence crime in St. Louis as a whole. So we measured all of them, looked at them again with Dr. Jessica Utz, and we found 6 months after our experiment, St. Louis as a whole, the violent crime had been going up and it continued to go up. St. Louis property crime, again, carried on going up. Fairground, the area of our intention, but we were only focusing on violent crime. So the property crime continued to go up, but the violent crime, the focus of our intention, actually went down by 43%. So that was amazing, but not the point of my story. Something else happened that was extraordinary. The first time we did a peace experiment with Cheryl Lenko, I surveyed the participants and they wrote back things like this. "It is as if my brain is wired to a bigger network," said one. And other people said this. They reported extraordinary feelings of energy. Now remember, people taking part in these intention experiments are taking part on my website from their computers or with a live video, but they're still taking part individually in front of their computers from all over the world. And they're writing in things like this. "I felt like I stepped into a palpable stream of energy along my arms and hands. My whole body was tingling and I was having goosebumps. I felt a strong current in my body. It was like a solid magnetic force field all around me. Sort of like what I imagine it would be like to be locked in a tractor beam like in Star Trek." It stopped soon after the experiment. Participants also reported things happening in their own lives. Their own lives were becoming more peaceful. They reported being closer to loved ones. They reported on healing estranged relationships. Many said that they had left their jobs. A number left their jobs and wanted a new life purpose. People were doing things like, I know a few wanted to join the Peace Corps. And most of all, about half said they were feeling closer to strangers, closer to everyone they came into contact with. "I feel more love for everyone I come into contact with." And after St. Louis, the same thing happened. People were writing in, and this has happened with every peace experiment. They said, "A true miracle happened. It is healing the relationship between all of us, my mother and her daughters." Someone else wrote, "My father apologized for disowning me." Someone else wrote, "Things smoothed out unexpectedly with my difficult new boss. It's night and day now." Someone else wrote, "My estranged son has suddenly more time for me. He calls me and comes to see me after 20 years of being a practical stranger." But most of all, people were feeling more love for everybody. People were hugging strangers, they reported. And this carried on when we did an experiment for a fellow called Todd Voss, who was a Gulf War veteran, an American Gulf War veteran, who had come home with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So bad, when he would walk into a room, he was so hypervigilant, he would have to lean against a wall and just survey it, just to see if he was safe. So we did this intention live online with a neuroscientist who was able to measure different brainwaves signified by different colors that were happening in real time as he put an EEG cap on Todd Voss, which is him right there. And we used another control person, Kathy Martin, to send intention to. Now, we were focusing on those turquoise stripes, as you can see at the bottom of the picture on the left, and trying to make them bigger because we were trying to increase his alpha brain waves. And we did. And we had a major effect on Todd. After the experiment, he reported that he was able to travel. He didn't need any more treatment. He felt much better. He managed to meet the love of his life. They got married, they had a child, and he didn't seek any more treatment. So that was remarkable, but not the point of the story. The point of the story is what happened to the participants. Again, we got reports like this. One woman had pain in the knee and she said it's completely gone. Someone else wrote in and said he has regular digestion for the first time in 20 years. Someone else said no longer experiencing sciatic pain. Someone else had anxiety and panic attacks, but they disappeared. Someone else wrote in continuing improvement to skin condition. I had relief in my hips, said someone else, as if I had taken some pain relief. Once again, I'm thinking to myself, what on earth is going on here? And it started to dawn on me that maybe there was such another thing that was much more important even than the outcome of our experiments, which was a kind of a mirror effect going on. And this was extraordinary to me because I realized that we weren't just affecting the targets, we were affecting the participants as well. So I decided to test this further to find out what was going on with Power of 8 groups and also intention experiments, big groups and small. Would it heal everything in both the senders and the receivers? So in 2015, I set up a year-long Power of 8 course. And I invited people to be part of it. They would get teaching from me over 6 weeks with various catch-up calls later. But we'd also put them in groups and we would monitor what went on in their health, their finances and career, their relationships, even their life's purpose. And very soon we had remarkable effects. For instance, here's a fellow called Mitchell Dean. Now, Mitchell is a clinical psychologist, but he suffered from serious, nearly suicidal depression for many, many years, as long as he remembered. And this isn't a very good look for a clinical psychologist. And as an integrative specialist, he'd tried everything and he still couldn't get better. So we had his Power of 8 group set an intention for him to find the source of this depression and find the right healer to heal it. And soon after that, he had a very powerful urge to go see a particular Chinese herbalist who felt that he ought to check out his liver filtration systems. And once he did, he discovered that one of his filtration systems wasn't working. And when it was treated, wasn't working properly, when it was treated, once it was treated, his depression eased enormously. And he is now absolutely fantastic. And there it went. And but other parts of his life also over the year began changing. His Qigong practice got better. He lost 15 pounds and got back to his fighting weight. He had had writer's block and that lifted too. And so this was happening to most members of this group. I had 250 people participate. Of the 150 people who met regularly in their Power of 8 groups, and remember, they were meeting virtually with these people. They were from all different places, and they were meeting together on Zoom or Skype. Nevertheless, of the 150 who continued to meet regularly, just about 100% had major life changes. But during the year, before that time, there were some people who were stuck. And one of those people was Andy Spiros. Now, Andy was a very talented young woman who was going through a divorce. She was very good in marketing and coaching. She had sold her gift shop business. And with 2 small children, she really needed a new job. But she was applying for all sorts of things, which she was good at, and not getting any work anywhere. So we tried all kinds of things, and I finally said to her, Andy, get off of yourself. Try intending for someone else and see what happens. And the someone else I had in mind for her and everyone else in these Power of 8 groups was a young boy called Luke. Now, Luke was 15 at the time, and he had broken up with his first serious girlfriend. And in a fit of adolescence angst, he threw himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. Now, Luke broke everything in his body. He had brain damage, nerve damage. This is what Luke looked like when he first got to the hospital. So we set an intention for him with all of the groups over 3 Sundays, while his stepfather, who had contacted me about Luke, kept a running commentary of exactly what was going on with Luke during the times we set intention. So the doctors didn't even think Luke was going to live. But soon after, Luke had a remarkable rebound, and within a week or 2, he was able to zip around in the hospital on his wheelchair. Soon after some more of our intentions, there he is working on devices like any 15-year-old. And soon after, his friends came to visit him in the hospital, and he was getting so much better. And within a few weeks, Luke, who they didn't even think was going to live, was home. And here he is as a healthy 18-year-old. So did we do this? Short answer, who knows? Maybe it was just good doctoring. Maybe it was our intention. But Luke's changes, the major changes in his attitude and in his health, all seemed to come about just at the time we were sending intention to him. We know one thing, it's not a placebo effect, because like most 15-year-old adolescents, he believed his parents' beliefs, particularly in the power of intention, were pretty stupid. So that was interesting. But what was more interesting is what happened to Andy. Right after she participated in focusing on Luke and not herself, Andy got a call out of nowhere offering her her dream job from somebody she didn't even know. And that also happened over and over again. So I started realizing that a real key element here was the power of altruism, the power of getting off of yourself. And I found this when I started studying the evidence about altruism. Altruism is like a bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people in every regard are healthier, happier, and live longer in every way. There was one really fascinating study about this, looking at praying, and it was done by a psychologist who's also a priest, who had seen that there's a lot of evidence for prayer helping with physical ailments, but he wondered if it could help with mental conditions too. So he recruited 400 people with clinical depression. He divided them into 2 groups. One group received the prayer, and the other group were trained to give the prayer. And afterward, he measured them on a whole bunch of parameters. And he found that the people who received the prayer did really well. They were improved, but nowhere near as improved as the people who had given the prayer, who had done the praying. And that's what you see over and over and over again. The power of altruism heals not only the recipient, but the healer. And I found that with one of my favorite studies. This study looked at whether or not, what happens with the immune systems of people who live certain lives. So they compared immune system parameters with people who live a life of, of comfort and affluence with those who live a life of service. So they looked at the people who were living the dream, basically, people who are living the life with lots of money, lots of holidays, jobs they enjoyed, all of that kind of thing, living a life of comfort. And they found that in most cases, their immune systems were terrible. These people very soon were going to drop like flies. They were perfect candidates for all those degenerative diseases like heart attacks, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and the rest. And then they compared them and those results with people who were living a life of service. Now, these people didn't have as much money, didn't have as many holidays, but their immune systems were extraordinarily robust. These people were going to live forever. And so I started thinking about that and thinking about the whole self-help movement and how toxic that might really be. This idea of I want, I get. Maybe it's I want, I get, and I get sick. Maybe the real secret sauce here is getting off of yourself and sending intention to somebody else. Here's what one 10-minute group intention did for a guy called Wes Chapman. Now, Wes was a very sad story. He was a member of a Power of 8 group I set up in Colorado, and this was his first Power of 8 group. He had great dreams as a college student. He was at a university studying biochemistry and wanted to be a doctor or a biochemist when he was called up at the very end of the Vietnam War. And that was at the time where there were no more deferments for college students. So he had to go and be there in the front line. This was so traumatic for him that he came home deeply depressed, dropped out of university, didn't finish, and his life continued in a terrible downward spiral thereafter. Even when he met the love of his life, his second wife, that did not last that long because she developed a rapid growing cancer and he lost her and lost even his home, paying for her medical bills. So by the time I met him at the age of 65, he was pretty depressed. He felt as if life was over and it was difficult for him to even get up in the morning to do the simplest tasks of all. He was also avoiding people. He was deeply depressed. So he didn't choose to be a receiver in this 10-minute group intention because there was a woman there with advanced cancer and he felt that she was more deserving. But this is what happened to him afterward.
I went to bed and the next morning when I woke up, it was an amazing thing. The first thing I felt was this energy. It was like the wheels are moving. It's like I can do what I need to do and do it happily. The second thing is amazingly heightened sensory awareness as well as the emotions that go with the sensations. Like I had a cup of herbal tea and it like knocked my socks off. It's like, wow. And even like doing the dishes was, I could feel this self-love. You know, we all think, well, it's wonderful to take care of yourself, and this is an act of self-love and self-care, and it's easy to think that, but to feel it, you know, the chores are actually fun. And I noticed, went outside a little bit, and I noticed flowers and trees are just so beautiful. It's like all my senses were multiplied by, I don't know, 5 or 10. And one of the surprising things too is I definitely had got in the habit of avoiding people. I tried to minimize my social contact, you know. And now it's like when I see someone coming, it's like I automatically feel enjoyment. It's like it just happens so fast. I don't have time to think about it. Here's a person. Wow, how are you? You know, and these good feelings come so quickly and so easily. When I went to bed that night, now this is the second night after the experience, I woke up in the morning with a clear memory of the most lucid dream is what a rational person would call it. I call it a vision. It was so clear and powerful. I found myself back on the campus that I was at where I was drafted, and where, you know, I sweated that out, and there was a chapel there that I always liked, and I walked past it every day, and it's like maybe the only sacred space on that campus. And this is not easy to describe. My 19-year-old self was waiting for me, and I felt the most powerful emotions of love and connection and joy. It's like all of his high hopes, all of his beautiful dreams, all of his optimism, all of his youthful energy, you know, it's like, wow. Somehow I left all that behind, you know, in that trauma, in that when I dropped into survival mode just to take my draft physical, and God help me, you know, I guess I left that behind. But to meet him again, and he's been waiting there so patiently for me, and it's like, I got it back. Now with my experience and wisdom and strength and toughness, and, you know, his optimism and hope and joy, it's like, hey, I get to start life all over again at 65. I've done a lot of work over the years, but this is the most phenomenal, the most powerful, and the most direct.
So that and Wes's experience and many others gave me a bigger idea. I wondered if this kind of experience, the act of group intention, could bring together warring individuals. Would it heal everything? If people were hugging strangers after doing peace intention experiments, would they also hug enemies? So I decided to do a Middle East peace intention experiment in November of 2017. And we've run some others since, but this one I want to talk to you about because I had a real unique situation. I had known Dr. Salah Al-Rashid, who has hosted me in a number of talks throughout the Middle East. He's like the Deepak Chopra of the Middle East, and he's brought personal development to all of the Gulf states in the Arab world. And he has many followers all around, and he also has a studio in the south of England. And he invited me to speak there, and it was a perfect opportunity to do an experiment. And this studio had two-way capability, so I could beam out to a number of audiences. They had cameras in 8 different Arab cities, with conference rooms in Arab cities, these 8 different Arab cities. And then what we did was we organized it so that the 9th camera would be in an auditorium filled with Israeli Jews. So we had Arabs from all those different cities in different conference rooms, and also an Israeli audience too. And I brought the both of them together to do a special peace intentions experiment for Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. And I figured this was good because everybody has a stake in it, and it had been experiencing a lot of violence, particularly around Damascus Gate. So I brought everybody together to do this intention while also running this intention live through my own YouTube channel. So we had thousands of people around the world. So here's what happened. Afterward, I could call on the members of the audience, the Arabs or the Israelis who were in those different audiences, and they could speak back to me and also to each other. So this is what they had to say. So are you ready to begin now, everybody? Our intention is to lower violence and restore peace in the old city of Jerusalem by at least 10% or more. Imagine it with your 5 senses. See people putting down their weapons. See people restoring peace there. See people hugging each other, hugging strangers, reaching across the aisles. Hold those intentions in your mind as you imagine yourself holding the hands of everyone on either side of you. If you're watching on YouTube, Imagine you're holding the hands of everybody, all the thousands of people on this call. Can you feel the connection? Are you seeing peace? We have someone from
Amman. This amazing experience. We all here crying at the room, our tears falling down.
Like a big party. I like to have fun, so I feel fun. I feel like I was young again, like I'm in a big party.
Like a commercial that you see on the road, and it was written, "The peace is already here." Yes.
Jeddah in Saudi Arabia.
I saw myself there, and I felt very strong love for the Jews, in spite of our raising up to hate the Jews. Beautiful feelings, beautiful images of unity, oneness, love, and peace.
We live in Jerusalem. We know it personally. And I've seen images of hugging, of soldiers and Arab people, of kindness one to another, of flowers all around Damascus Gate. This is so emotional. And I've seen the four quarters of the old city as the four rooms of my personal heart.
Yes, you're on Abu Dhabi.
Israelis are dancing, the Palestinians, they hug each other, and we are with the Israelis, like we share peace and love, which is an amazing thing. And I want to thank you and everybody participate in this participation.
Tunisia.
Yes, Tunisia. We saw a lot of children running and laughing. And there is a lot of butterflies and wearing a white clothes and running, and there is a loud voice of laughing.
You took me to the place I really love. I saw there a sunny day, lots of people laughing, lots of joy and happiness. I wish I could stay there. I wish I didn't come back.
My name is Fatima Salami, and the peace in Arabic means salam, and my name is Salami. So I feel in peace, I feel in love. I love all people in the whole world. I love you. I love you so much, and I feel full of love and full of peace. Your God is my God. I love you.
My name is Lily from Jerusalem. It's so overwhelming, the possibility to be connected with you, our sisters in Amman and in Damascus and in Iran and all over. We are thousands, hundreds of thousands of women here saying enough. It's about time to unite. We are one. It's time of compassion.
You can sing both, come.
So this little experiment went viral, and throughout Israel and in many places in the Arab nations, there were people tweeting about it and writing an article about it, because you have to recognize that Arabs are taught that many of them never even see an Israeli. They're taught to hate Israelis and then, or believe that they have horns growing out of their heads, and vice versa. And yet people were sending love back and forth, as you see, and saying things like, your God is my God. And so I wanted to try to figure out, so are you ready why this would be, and why we would have this experience, why they're so affected. And the answer came from a guy called Dr. Keltner, who is a psychologist at the University of Berkeley in California. Now, he did a study, a really interesting study with students, where he divided them into two groups. And one group saw pictures of the world's victims, you know, starving children. The second group were shown pictures designed to elicit pride, pictures of their own campus at the University of California at Berkeley, or their football team beating Stanford, their nearest rival, Stanford University. And afterward, when he showed them pictures afterward of groups of people. The people that the first group identified more with were people who were not like them. The people who had seen the victims identified with groups of people. If they were Democrats, they also identified with Republicans, or they identified with the homeless, or even prisoners, people not like them. They felt love for people like that. Whereas group two, they only identified with people like them, or the people they were going to become, lawyers, doctors, affluent people, or students themselves. They identified with people just like them. So what Dr. Keltner has realized is that when we do something compassionate, when we're involved with something compassionate, a thing called the love nerve gets turned on. It's the vagus nerve. It starts in the neck. It's the longest nerve in the body, and it winds its way through all of the major organs of the body. And this also is involved in the release of oxytocin. And when that is released, as he discovered, it also helps us feel more deeply and feel more love for everyone we come into contact with. It enables, as we saw with the Israeli experiment, the heart to leap across the fence. So suddenly, people recognize the other as a fellow human being. So there was one more thing for me to understand, which was what is going on inside the brains of people involved in Power of 8 groups. So luckily, the Life University, the largest chiropractic university, was interested too and put the neuroscience department at my disposal. And we ran a series of experiments with 7 groups of student volunteers, putting an EEG cap on one of the members of the group who was sending intention. Now, these were total novices. Most of these students had never even meditated before. Nevertheless, we saw major changes afterward. Just during those 10 minutes, once again, these are only 10-minute experiments or Power of 8 groups. I never do longer. We saw major changes in all the brain waves of all of the group members. And there was one slight deviation, but everybody else followed the suit. And this is an example of one person who had highly significant changes. And this was run by Dr. Stephanie Sullivan. And we expected we were going to have results just like meditation. They were nothing like that. So here's what she had to say.
So honestly, we found some pretty amazing results. Now, qualifying that, and that this was a case series where we only had 6 individuals that we were looking at. But to be honest, it was amazing. Across the board, we had one participant that varied slightly, but everyone else actually had a decrease in their frontal lobe, their parietal lobe, and their temporal lobe, and with some additional decrease in their occipital lobe. And all of this was on the right side of their brain. And of course, my natural thought is that, okay, this is going to look like meditation. So I was honestly surprised when it didn't look like the traditional meditation studies that we've seen where there was an increase in alpha.
And what we discovered is, yes, there was nothing like meditation, these results. We found a global quieting of the frontal and parietal lobes. Now, the parietal lobes sit back toward the end of the top of the head, and they help us navigate through space. They tell us what's me and what's not me. And they were dialed way down, as were parts of the frontal lobe involved in worry, doubt, negativity. They were also dialed way down. And also the frontal lobes make us feel they're our executive part of our brain. They really are involved in very much a sense of me. And they were turned way down too. So there's where the parietal lobes sit and the frontal lobes. So as she said, these were nothing like meditation and the brainwave signatures of meditation, much more like brainwave signatures recorded by Dr. Andrew Newberg, then at the University of Pennsylvania, studying Sufi masters involved in chanting or Buddhist monks in ecstatic prayer. When he looked at them, he found exactly the same thing: quieting of the parietal lobes, quieting of the frontal lobes, blurring between me and not me. So there was only one conclusion I could draw, which is that a Power of 8 group is a fast track to the miraculous. It was a way, and you don't need all the kinds of things people think of. You don't need sweat lodges. You don't need years of disciplined practice. All you need is a group and a common intention. And there you go, an instant passport to a mystical experience, a state of oneness. So before I leave you, I just want to tell you about some of my books. My latest book, The Power of 8, joins what I call the Field Quartet, which started with my book, The Field, and then I wrote, which is the overview of the science, then the intention experiment, my book, The Bond, which is all about how to live this, and the Power of 8 group, the Power of 8, which is all about creating a Power of 8 group in all of the things that I've discovered. I am shortly starting a web TV channel, Conversations with Lynne McTaggart, and it's about living the new science. I also have a podcast, Living the New Science. You'll find this out on my website, lynnmctaggart.com. Don't forget to check out my magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You. We've been going for many, many years, and 30 years now. We are in 15 languages, including Russian, and we are always reporting on what works and what doesn't work in conventional and alternative medicine, particularly looking for holistic solutions and non-drug-based medicine. And we have serious journalism, in-depth investigative reporting, the kind of things you don't see anywhere else. I run online courses. My year-long Intention Masterclass carries on every year, beginning in the end of January, beginning of February. So check out my courses. I run many others too, many online courses. Check that out at lynnmctaggart.com. And we just started a thing called Get Well. We started as an actual exhibition last February at Olympia in London, and we're running a giant virtual show, the Serious Alternative Health Show, on November 12th to 15th. You can find out more at getwell.solutions. We are going to have leading therapists who are healing people of all kinds of illnesses around the world speaking at this event. So if you have a particular condition and you're not getting well, this is a way to get well with a holistic method. So please join us with these top innovators and you'll find out how to get well. I'm going to be running a big intention experiment trying to heal polarization in certain areas, and we're aiming for September 21st. You can find out more on my website, lynnmctaggart.com. Check me out on Facebook, Lynne McTaggart 2011. And if you want your own virtual Power of 8 group, I have a Facebook group anyone can join where you just announce what your time zone is and you can join Connecting and Healing Through the Power of 8. And there's my website. And I want to stop this share so I can say goodbye to you and thank you once again, Dr. Korotkov, for inviting me to be part of this wonderful conference. I say goodbye from sunny London. I wish you all well, and please do check out my work, my website, lynnmctaggart.com. And also, I just want to leave you with one thought, which is, as I said, you know, did we do this? Had we done any of this? What is the possibility that some of the most amazing results that I've witnessed are the inevitable results of changes made over time? I no longer ask that question. I realize that some miracles just happen and cannot always be rationally explained. And one of those is the miracle of people coming together in a group. Something happens when people lose themselves in a larger group with a common intention that defies rational explanation. Somehow, this whole experience was gifted to me. And I realize that I'm its gatekeeper. I make sure that it's used in the right way. But this gift also belongs to you. So what I have discovered is the power of groups, any kind of group. You don't need years of disciplined practice. You don't need sweat lodges. You don't need loads and loads of activity. All you need is a common intention, a common prayer, if you want to call it, and a group. And it's your passport to the miraculous. So find this out for yourself. Don't squander this gift. Get your own Power of 8 group and find it out for yourself. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, excellent, excellent, and once again, excellent lecture by Lynne McTaggart. And well, this is one of the biggest in the world intention experiments done. Those organized and held by Lynne McTaggart. So excellent presentation, and thanks a lot for that.